on the island we're headed to?
Don't see that every day.
Or ever.
If we get this DNA, millions of gliders.
Time to move.
Long shot.
That's kind of our specialty.
Jurassic World Rebirth arrives as a fascinating attempt to give one of cinema's most commercially powerful dinosaur franchises a fresh identity without pretending that the history beginning with Jurassic Park in 1993 can simply be erased. And that tension between legacy and reinvention is the most useful place to begin analyzing Gareth Edwards' 2025 film, because Rebirth is simultaneously a continuation, a reset, a survival adventure, a monster movie, a science fiction thriller, and a deliberate effort to recover some of the danger and mystery that made dinosaurs feel extraordinary before the Jurassic World era transformed them into increasingly familiar inhabitants of a much larger franchise universe. Released theatrically on July 2, 2025, Jurassic World Rebirth is directed by Gareth Edwards from a screenplay by David Koepp, the screenwriter whose connection to the franchise reaches directly back to Steven Spielberg's original Jurassic Park and the Lost World, Jurassic Park, and that creative decision immediately tells us something about what Universal wanted this installment to represent. Rather than continuing directly with Owen Grady and Claire Dearing as the central heroes, the movie introduces a new ensemble led by Scarlett Johansson as covert operations specialist Zora Bennett, Mahershala Ali as Duncan Kincaid, and Jonathan Bailey as paleontologist Dr. Henry Loomis. Rupert Friend plays pharmaceutical representative Martin Krebs, Manuel Garcia-Rulfo plays Ruben Delgado, and the supporting cast includes Luna Blaise, David Iacono, Audrina Miranda, Philippine Velge, Bechir Sylvain, and Ed Skrein. Frank Marshall and Patrick Crowley serve as producers, while Steven Spielberg is among the executive producers alongside Dennis L. Stewart and Jim Spencer. The film's reported production budget was approximately $180 million, a major blockbuster investment but notably controlled relative to some of Hollywood's most expensive modern tentpoles, and its theatrical performance ultimately demonstrated that the Jurassic name still possesses enormous global power. The movie finished with roughly $869 million worldwide, meaning it did not reach the billion-dollar level achieved by each entry in the preceding Jurassic World trilogy, but it nevertheless became one of 2025's largest Hollywood theatrical successes and generated a worldwide gross approaching 5 times its reported production budget before considering the important realities of theatrical revenue sharing, marketing expenses, distribution costs, participations, and other expenses that prevent worldwide gross from being interpreted as pure studio profit. That distinction matters in any serious financial analysis. A movie earning $869 million against a $180 million production budget has clearly generated enormous ticket sales, but theaters keep part of those ticket revenues and studios spend heavily on global marketing. So simply subtracting $180 million from $869 million would produce a misleading idea of profit. What the numbers can safely tell us is that Jurassic World Rebirth remained a powerful theatrical attraction despite arriving as the 7th feature in a franchise that had already spent more than 3 decades repeatedly returning audiences to genetically recreated dinosaurs. Its opening performance reinforced that strength. During its extended opening period, the movie reached more than $300 million worldwide, showing that the combination of the Jurassic brand, a completely refreshed leading cast, Gareth Edwards' reputation for large-scale visual filmmaking, and the promise of dangerous dinosaurs remained capable of creating event-level theatrical interest. But commercial strength alone does not explain why Rebirth exists. The more interesting question is what problem the movie is trying to solve creatively. Jurassic World Dominion ended the previous trilogy in 2022 after the franchise had progressively expanded its premise from dinosaurs contained inside parks and islands to dinosaurs living throughout the modern world. That escalation created spectacle, but it also created a storytelling problem. Dinosaurs become less mysterious when they can appear almost anywhere. The original Jurassic Park generated awe because seeing a living dinosaur felt impossible. It generated fear because a controlled environment failed and characters suddenly discovered that humans were not actually controlling anything. By the later films, dinosaurs had become part of a sprawling global mythology involving genetic corporations, black markets, weaponization concepts, cloned humans, and worldwide ecological consequences. Rebirth therefore needed a method of making dinosaurs feel dangerous and geographically concentrated again without simply pretending the previous films never happened. David Koepp's screenplay provides an elegant franchise-level solution. 5 years after the events of Jurassic World Dominion, Earth's ecology has become largely unsuitable for the surviving dinosaurs, and the remaining populations are concentrated in isolated equatorial regions whose climates resemble the prehistoric environments in which these creatures once thrived. This immediately changes the dramatic geography. Instead of dinosaurs being ordinary global wildlife, they are once again concentrated in dangerous places humans have reasons to avoid. The movie can therefore return to one of the franchise's strongest structural ideas: people deliberately entering a place dominated by dinosaurs and then discovering that leaving is far more difficult than arriving. This restoration of geographic isolation is important because survival thrillers benefit from boundaries. Jurassic Park worked because Isla Nublar trapped the characters. The Lost World used Isla Sorna. Jurassic Park the Third returned to an isolated island environment. The Jurassic World films initially revived the park setting before expanding beyond it. Rebirth effectively recognizes that the franchise's most reliable suspense comes when humans are visitors inside dinosaur territory rather than dinosaurs being visitors inside ours. The difference changes power. In a city, humans have infrastructure, vehicles, weapons, communication systems, hospitals, and enormous numerical advantage. On an isolated island, dinosaurs control the environment. Humans become physically vulnerable again. Gareth Edwards is particularly suited to this approach because his filmmaking career has repeatedly emphasized scale. Monsters, Godzilla, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, and The Creator all demonstrate his interest in placing relatively small human figures against enormous environments, machines, creatures, or institutions. Jurassic World Rebirth gives him creatures whose cinematic appeal has always depended partly on scale. A dinosaur becomes more impressive when the camera reminds us how small a human being looks beside it. Spielberg understood this intuitively in Jurassic Park. The first Brachiosaurus sequence is not memorable merely because the visual effect was groundbreaking. It is memorable because the human characters stop and look. Their reaction teaches the audience how to feel. Awe requires time. Terror similarly requires anticipation. If dinosaurs appear constantly, the audience adapts. If the filmmaker withholds them, uses environmental clues, sound, movement, and partial visibility, then the eventual appearance can feel significant. Rebirth's creative challenge is therefore not simply producing realistic dinosaurs. Modern visual effects technology has made convincing digital creatures expected in a movie of this scale. The challenge is restoring emotional meaning to their appearance. Gareth Edwards approaches the material with a visual sensibility interested in environments that dwarf the characters, and this helps move the franchise back toward adventure and survival rather than constant superhero-like escalation. Scarlett Johansson's Zora Bennett is crucial to this reset because she represents a very different protagonist from the scientists, parents, and dinosaur trainers who previously led the franchise. Zora is a covert operations specialist recruited for an extremely dangerous extraction mission. This gives her immediate competence. She is not an ordinary civilian accidentally trapped with dinosaurs. She knowingly accepts dangerous work. That changes how the audience evaluates her. When a character has military or covert experience, the screenplay cannot generate suspense merely by making her panic. The danger must exceed her professional preparation. Dinosaurs are perfect for that purpose because tactical training is designed around human threats and predictable operational environments. A prehistoric predator does not care about ordinary combat logic. Zora can understand weapons, extraction plans, boats, routes, and team coordination while still entering an ecosystem where the enemy is fundamentally unpredictable. Scarlett Johansson's casting strengthens this concept because audiences already associate her with physically capable action characters, especially after years of playing Natasha Romanoff in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film can therefore establish Zora's credibility quickly. We believe she can handle herself before she proves it. The more interesting task is making that competence insufficient. Jurassic stories become frightening when human expertise encounters something expertise cannot fully control. The original movie used scientists who understood genetics but could not control the ecosystem they created. Rebirth uses experienced operatives who understand dangerous missions but cannot reduce dinosaurs to ordinary tactical obstacles. Zora's mission is not initially motivated by pure scientific curiosity. She is hired as part of an extraction operation involving biological material from 3 enormous prehistoric creatures whose DNA could potentially contribute to the development of a major medical breakthrough. This gives the story a familiar Jurassic combination of science and commerce. The franchise has always been interested in what happens when extraordinary biological discoveries acquire financial value. John Hammond wanted to build a theme park around cloned dinosaurs. Ingen and later corporations repeatedly treated genetic technology as intellectual property and commercial opportunity. Jurassic World turned dinosaurs into entertainment products on an enormous scale. Other entries explored military applications and genetic experimentation. Rebirth shifts the commercial temptation toward medicine. This is a clever choice because medical value creates a morally more complicated objective than simple profit. If dinosaur-derived biological material could contribute to a treatment capable of saving human lives, entering a forbidden ecosystem becomes easier to justify ethically. The characters are not merely stealing dinosaur DNA because someone wants to build another park. The mission can be presented as potentially beneficial to millions of people. Yet the presence of Rupert Friends Martin Krebs, representing pharmaceutical interests, immediately reminds us that scientific breakthroughs exist inside economic systems. Who owns the discovery? Who profits from it? Who receives access to the medicine? Does the humanitarian potential justify dangerous extraction? These questions connect Rebirth to the ethical DNA of Michael Crichton's original concept. Jurassic Park has never fundamentally been about dinosaurs alone. Dinosaurs are the spectacular consequence of human beings gaining technological power faster than they develop the wisdom required to use it responsibly. The original breakthrough was genetic resurrection. Rebirth asks what happens when those resurrected organisms become biological resources for another technological breakthrough. The cycle begins again. Humans encounter something extraordinary, recognize potential value, and immediately construct a mission around extracting that value. Nature becomes an asset. The language changes, but the instinct remains familiar. This is why the title Rebirth can be interpreted on several levels. The franchise itself is being reborn with a new cast and creative direction. The story continues to exist because extinct creatures were biologically reborn through genetic engineering. The mission seeks another form of rebirth through medical science, potentially giving patients new chances at life. At the same time, the title contains irony because every attempt to manipulate biological life in this franchise eventually creates consequences nobody fully predicted. Rebirth sounds hopeful, but Jurassic history teaches us to treat scientific rebirth cautiously. David Koepp's return as screenwriter strengthens this connection with the franchise's original philosophical framework. His screenplay for Spielberg's Jurassic Park translated Michael Crichton's dense scientific and corporate ideas into accessible cinematic conflict. Bringing Koepp back allows Rebirth to reconnect structurally with the simpler adventure logic of those earlier films. Assemble a group of characters with conflicting motivations, place them in an isolated dinosaur environment, establish a scientific or commercial objective, and then allow nature to dismantle the human plan. This is the central pleasure of Jurassic storytelling. Humans arrive with maps, schedules, weapons, contracts, and theories. Dinosaurs do not care. The plan exists primarily so the movie can destroy it. Rebirth embraces this by building the mission around targeted biological samples, giving the characters concrete objectives while ensuring that each objective requires them to approach enormous creatures rather than avoid them. This is an effective reversal of normal survival logic. If you are trapped somewhere with dinosaurs, the sensible strategy is to stay as far away from them as possible. The mission requires the opposite. The characters must deliberately find some of the most dangerous animals in the environment. That creates suspense naturally because every success requires increased exposure to danger. Dr. Henry Loomis, played by Jonathan Bailey, provides the scientific perspective necessary to balance Zora's operational expertise. A Jurassic film benefits from having someone who sees dinosaurs as more than threats. If every character views the creatures simply as monsters, the franchise loses the awe that distinguishes it from generic creature features. Henry's paleontological knowledge reconnects the movie with the wonder of prehistoric life. He can recognize behavior, species, biological significance, and the extraordinary nature of seeing organisms humanity previously knew only through fossils. This perspective matters because the audience needs permission to admire the dinosaurs even while fearing them. Jurassic Park has always depended on that contradiction. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is terrifying, but it is also magnificent. Raptors are lethal, but their intelligence is fascinating. Giant herbivores create awe because their scale makes the impossible feel real. Rebirth needs Henry because he keeps scientific wonder alive inside a mission increasingly shaped by danger and profit. Jonathan Bailey brings warmth and intellectual enthusiasm to the role, which helps differentiate Henry from Zora. Zora evaluates environments through survival. Henry evaluates them through discovery. Put them in front of the same dinosaur and they may initially see different things. Zora sees distance, escape routes, and threat. Henry sees anatomy, behavior, and evolutionary history. Neither perspective is sufficient alone. Scientific fascination without survival awareness can become reckless. Tactical caution without scientific understanding can misread animal behavior. Their collaboration therefore gives the story a natural character dynamic. Mahershala Ali's Duncan Kincaid adds another emotional and operational layer. Universal describes Duncan as Zora's most trusted team member, which means the relationship begins with history rather than requiring the movie to manufacture trust from nothing. This is useful because ensemble adventure movies need some pre-existing emotional connections. If every character meets at the beginning, relationships can feel purely functional. Duncan's connection with Zora tells us she has worked with people she trusts and gives the mission personal stakes beyond money. Mahershala Ali brings a calm authority that suits the character. He can communicate competence without exaggerated bravado, which is especially valuable in a film where the creatures already provide enormous spectacle. Duncan does not need to compete visually with dinosaurs. His value comes from making the human side credible. Survival movies depend on audience investment in who survives. Spectacular creature attacks become emotionally empty if the humans feel disposable. This was one of the challenges facing some later Jurassic installments as the scale expanded. When the audience begins waiting primarily for the next dinosaur sequence, human drama becomes connective tissue rather than the reason suspense matters. Rebirth attempts to reverse that hierarchy by giving the central group clearer personalities and relationships. Zora is professional but not invulnerable. Henry is scientifically driven. Duncan brings loyalty and experience. Krebs brings corporate motivation. The Delgado family introduces civilians whose objectives have nothing to do with the extraction mission. This second group is especially important because Rebirth does not rely solely on trained specialists. Manuel Garcia-Rulfo plays Ruben Delgado, father of a family that becomes shipwrecked and drawn into the same dangerous environment. Luna Blaise, David Iacono, and Audrina Miranda are part of this civilian storyline. Their presence changes the emotional texture because survival means something different when children and family relationships are involved. A professional operative knowingly accepts risk. A civilian family does not. This creates moral responsibility for the specialists once the groups intersect. Zora can no longer think only about completing the mission and extracting her team. People who never agreed to the danger now need protection. Jurassic films have often benefited from family dynamics because dinosaurs become more frightening when characters have someone vulnerable to protect. The original Jurassic Park used Lex and Tim. The Lost World included Kelly. Jurassic Park the Third revolved around parents searching for their son. Jurassic World placed brothers Zack and Gray inside the collapsing park. Fallen Kingdom and Dominion continued using family and surrogate family stakes. Rebirth's Delgado family therefore connects the new story with a recurring franchise tradition while avoiding the need to bring previous characters back. The family also offers a different emotional perspective on the dinosaur environment. Henry may see scientific wonder. Zora sees operational danger. Ruben sees a threat to his children. That parental perspective strips away abstraction. A dinosaur does not represent a scientific breakthrough when it is approaching your family. It represents immediate survival. The film can therefore move between wonder, professional tension, corporate greed, and parental fear depending on which character controls the scene. This variety is important in a 2-hour-plus blockbuster because repeated dinosaur attacks can become monotonous if every sequence produces the same emotion. A good Jurassic film needs different kinds of encounters. Some should create awe. Some should create dread. Some should be fast chases. Some should be quiet stalking sequences. Some should reveal scale. Some should expose human arrogance. Gareth Edwards' visual instincts are useful here because he tends to approach large creatures through perspective rather than simply displaying them in clean full-body shots constantly. A partial shape behind vegetation, movement beneath water, a distant silhouette, or an enormous body entering the frame relative to a tiny human can create stronger scale than non-stop close-up spectacle. Rebirth's Island Research Facility also gives the film an opportunity to introduce a darker dimension of genetic experimentation. Universal's official description presents the location as an island facility connected to the original Jurassic Park research history and inhabited by dangerous creatures that were left behind. This premise allows the filmmakers to explore not only naturally recreated dinosaurs but organisms shaped by genetic experimentation. The Jurassic World era increasingly introduced hybrid creatures, most famously the Indominus Rex and Indoraptor, reflecting the franchise's movement from resurrecting extinct animals toward designing new ones. Rebirth continues the idea that genetic power produces creatures beyond anything paleontology actually discovered. This is thematically appropriate because once scientists demonstrate the ability to reconstruct genomes, the temptation to modify them becomes almost inevitable. The original Jurassic Park already established that the animals were not perfect historical reproductions because missing genetic sequences had been filled using DNA from modern species. The later films expanded that concept into deliberate engineering. Rebirth's dangerous research environment represents the consequences of experimentation that exceeded even commercial usefulness. Some creations are not products. They are failures abandoned when the cost of controlling them becomes too high. This introduces an almost horror-like idea into the franchise. The island is not simply a dinosaur habitat but a biological graveyard of human ambition where experiments survived after their creators left. That gives the location history. Characters are not entering untouched nature. They are entering a place damaged by scientific intervention. The danger therefore comes from both prehistoric biology and human choices. This is classic Jurassic territory. The dinosaurs are rarely morally responsible for the disaster. Humans created the conditions. A predator hunts because it is a predator. The ethical failure belongs to the people who resurrected, modified, confined, commercialized, or abandoned it. Rebirth can therefore make its creatures frightening without portraying nature itself as evil. This distinction matters. The best Jurassic films understand that dinosaurs are animals, even when the filmmaking temporarily presents them like movie monsters. Human beings repeatedly assign them roles they never chose: attraction, weapon, experiment, pharmaceutical resource. The creatures simply exist according to their biology. The tragedy comes from humans insisting that existence must serve a purpose. Zora's mission continues that pattern because the team is literally entering dinosaur territory to extract biological value. Even if the medical objective is noble, the fundamental behavior remains human appropriation of nature. The movie's ethical tension comes from whether the potential benefit justifies that intrusion. If the extracted DNA can save millions of human lives, many viewers will understandably answer yes. But Jurassic stories are built around the warning that noble intentions do not eliminate unintended consequences. John Hammond initially believed he was creating wonder. Scientists believed they were achieving something extraordinary. Investors saw entertainment. Nobody planned for catastrophe. Rebirth again places intelligent, capable people inside a mission that appears rational on paper. The suspense comes from knowing the Jurassic universe punishes confidence. Plans collapse. Technology fails. Weather changes. Animals behave unexpectedly. Human greed complicates cooperation. Escape routes disappear. The environment reminds everyone that control was always temporary. Gareth Edwards' direction is particularly compatible with this philosophy because his films often depict institutions and technologies as enormous systems that ordinary individuals cannot fully command. In Godzilla, humans are largely powerless beside ancient creatures. Rogue One follows individuals confronting a massive imperial machine. The creator explores war against advanced artificial intelligence through large-scale environments and technology. Rebirth gives Edwards another story where humans enter a world larger than themselves. Dinosaurs provide literal scale, but the deeper scale comes from geological time. A human life is tiny compared with the evolutionary history represented by these creatures. Paleontology asks us to imagine millions of years, while human ambition often operates in quarterly profits and immediate objectives. Henry Loomis embodies awareness of that contrast. Krebs embodies the commercial urgency. Zora exists between them, hired to accomplish the mission rather than philosophize about it, but survival forces her to reconsider what the mission is worth. Rupert Friend's Martin Krebs becomes especially important because corporate representatives in Jurassic stories frequently reveal how quickly scientific wonder can be translated into ownership. Krebs does not need to behave like a cartoon villain for the conflict to work. His incentives alone can place him at odds with others. A pharmaceutical company investing in a dangerous expedition expects a return. The more expensive and risky the mission becomes, the greater the pressure to complete it rather than abandon the objective for safety. This creates a classic sunk cost dilemma. Once people have traveled into the dangerous zone, lost equipment, risked lives, and approached the target animals, turning back can feel like wasting everything already sacrificed. But continuing can create even greater losses. Survival thrillers often use this psychological trap because rational retreat becomes emotionally difficult. Zora may understand when the operation has become too dangerous. Krebs may see abandoning the mission as unacceptable. Henry may remain motivated by scientific importance. Duncan may prioritize his team. Reuben prioritizes his family. These conflicting objectives mean the dinosaurs are not the only source of danger. Human priorities fragment cooperation. This is essential because a creature feature becomes more dramatic when characters disagree about what survival requires. If everyone shares the same objective, decisions become simpler. Rebirth creates competing definitions of success. For Krebs, success may mean obtaining the biological material. For Zora, success initially means completing the contract but can evolve toward getting people out alive. For Henry, scientific discovery matters. For Duncan, loyalty matters. For Reuben, only his family's survival truly matters. When circumstances worsen, these priorities collide. The audience then has to ask which objective deserves sacrifice. Is a medical breakthrough worth risking one team? How many lives can ethically be endangered for a treatment that might save millions? Does the possibility of future benefit justify immediate exploitation? These questions are much more interesting than simply asking whether the heroes can outrun a dinosaur. The dinosaur provides physical suspense. The mission provides moral suspense. Scarlett Johansson's Zora sits at the center because she is positioned to make practical decisions under pressure. Her background suggests someone accustomed to separating emotion from operational necessity, but the Jurassic environment makes that separation increasingly difficult. When civilians become involved and team members face lethal consequences, the mission can no longer remain abstract. This gives Johansson an opportunity to play competence alongside moral recalibration. Zora does not need the traditional arc of becoming brave because she is already brave. Her growth can instead involve deciding what her expertise should serve. Professional competence is morally neutral. A highly skilled person can use that skill for money, institutions, personal loyalty, or humanitarian protection. Zora's choices determine what kind of protagonist she becomes. This is more interesting than simply making her the next dinosaur action hero. She enters the story as someone capable of doing dangerous work and gradually encounters reasons to question who benefits from that work. Mahershala Ali's Duncan strengthens this because trust between them means decisions carry relational consequences. If Zora chooses the mission over safety, Duncan experiences that choice personally. If Duncan takes risks for others, Zora must respond as both leader and friend. Their pre-existing bond makes sacrifice meaningful. Jonathan Bailey's Henry adds another kind of emotional investment because his fascination with prehistoric life risks becoming dangerous if curiosity overwhelms caution. Scientists in Jurassic stories often occupy this unstable position. The thing that can kill them is also the thing they have spent their lives dreaming of seeing. That contradiction produces some of the franchise's best moments. Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park fears what has been created while remaining intellectually fascinated. Ian Malcolm recognizes danger but cannot stop analyzing the system. Henry inherits the tradition of scientific wonder inside catastrophe. He can look at a dinosaur and see millions of years of evolutionary history made living. Zora sees teeth. Both are correct. Rebirth needs both perspectives because reducing dinosaurs to monsters would betray the franchise's original emotional range. Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park did something unusually powerful. It made audiences cry with wonder at one dinosaur and later fear another dinosaur in the same film. The creatures could represent beauty and terror simultaneously. Rebirth's attempt to recover that duality is central to its identity. Gareth Edwards has spoken through his filmmaking style for years about the importance of scale and visual awe, and the Jurassic franchise offers an ideal canvas for that approach. But scale alone cannot restore wonder. Context does. The audience has already seen hundreds of digital dinosaurs across 6 previous Jurassic movies, television projects, games, attractions, and decades of popular culture. Rebirth cannot reproduce the technological shock of 1993. Nobody watching in 2025 is surprised that filmmakers can create a photorealistic dinosaur. Therefore, the movie must generate wonder through composition, behavior, sound, atmosphere, and character reaction rather than novelty of technology. This is a crucial difference between the original film's challenge and Rebirth's challenge. Spielberg showed audiences something they had never seen convincingly before. Edwards must make audiences care about seeing it again. That is harder in some ways. Franchise fatigue is fundamentally a problem of familiarity. Spectacle loses value when repeated. The answer is not necessarily bigger spectacle. Sometimes the answer is restraint. Make the creature hidden again. Make the environment dangerous. Make characters vulnerable. Give encounters narrative meaning. Rebirth's return to isolated territory is therefore a creative necessity rather than nostalgia alone. It restores the conditions under which dinosaurs can become mysterious. The ecological explanation after Dominion helps accomplish this without completely erasing continuity. Dinosaurs existed throughout the world, but most environments proved unsuitable over time, concentrating survivors into regions closer to the climate of their prehistoric origins. Whether every scientific detail should be interpreted literally is less important than what the idea accomplishes dramatically. Dinosaurs are rare enough to feel extraordinary again. This is almost a meta-commentary on the franchise. The previous films made dinosaurs too common, so the new story makes them scarce. Scarcity creates value. The same principle applies to individual scenes. A dinosaur shown briefly can sometimes feel more powerful than one displayed continuously. A roar heard before the animal appears allows imagination to work. Water moving unexpectedly creates anticipation. Vegetation shifting tells us something large is nearby. Edwards understands the language of creature suspense because monsters and Godzilla both relied heavily on delayed revelation. Jurassic World Rebirth benefits when it applies that patience rather than treating every creature as a visual effects demonstration. The island facility also creates opportunities for environmental storytelling. Abandoned laboratories, structures reclaimed by vegetation, old equipment, containment systems, and evidence of earlier experiments can communicate history without lengthy exposition. The audience can see that humans once believed they controlled this place. Nature has since reclaimed it. This visual transformation embodies the franchise's central warning. Human infrastructure appears permanent only from a human perspective. Remove maintenance and time begins dismantling it. Plants grow through concrete. Animals occupy buildings. Technology rusts. The island becomes a monument to failed control. Characters entering it are effectively walking through the ruins of earlier confidence while repeating a similar act of confidence themselves. That irony is powerful. They know previous attempts to control dinosaurs failed, yet they still believe their mission can be carefully executed. This does not make them stupid. Human beings routinely return to dangerous environments because technology improves and objectives appear valuable. Rebirth's characters have better equipment, more knowledge, and decades of Jurassic history available to them. Yet no amount of information eliminates uncertainty when dealing with living ecosystems. This is another Crichton-like idea. Complex systems cannot be perfectly predicted because interactions multiply beyond human calculation. Dinosaurs move. Weather changes. Equipment fails. People lie. Fear alters decisions. One unexpected event creates another. A mission that looked manageable becomes chaos through accumulation rather than one single mistake. Gareth Edwards can visualize this escalation by gradually reducing the character's technological advantage. At the beginning, they have transportation, communications, weapons, plans, and professional confidence. Survival stories become compelling when those layers disappear one by one. Lose the boat. Lose communication. Lose team members. Lose the route. Lose daylight. Suddenly the modern human being is reduced to an animal trying not to be eaten. Jurassic stories repeatedly use this regression because it exposes the illusion of dominance. Humans control Earth through technology, not physical superiority. Remove technology and a large predator instantly changes the hierarchy. Rebirth's equatorial dinosaur zone becomes a place where modern civilization has little authority. That makes every piece of equipment feel temporary. The creatures do not need to understand human technology to defeat it. They simply need to survive longer than it does. The Delgado family intensifies this because civilians depend even more heavily on infrastructure. A professional extraction team may have emergency procedures. A family unexpectedly stranded in dangerous territory does not. Their vulnerability gives the movie a parallel survival narrative that can humanize the scale of the disaster. Ruben's objective is beautifully simple compared with the corporate mission: keep his children alive. Simplicity can create emotional clarity. He does not care about patents, scientific prestige, or extraction contracts. If obtaining dinosaur DNA makes survival less likely, he has no reason to continue. This places him naturally against anyone who prioritizes the mission. Manuel Garcia-Rulfo can therefore ground scenes through parental urgency. His character reminds the specialists that the environment contains people who never volunteered to become part of their operation. The younger members of the Delgado family also allow the movie to explore how different generations react to dinosaurs. Adults understand danger immediately because they recognize consequences. Younger characters may experience curiosity or awe alongside fear. This echoes the original Jurassic Park, where children functioned not merely as victims but as representatives of audience wonder. Dinosaurs are culturally connected to childhood fascination. Many viewers first encounter them through toys, books, museums, and imagination. Seeing a child encounter a living dinosaur therefore connects the impossible creature with the original sense of wonder many adults remember from childhood. Rebirth can use this without simply copying Lex and Tim because the emotional principle remains valid. Dinosaurs are terrifying precisely because we have spent our lives imagining them safely. The moment imagination becomes physical, wonder and danger collide. The movie's reported $180 million budget supports the scale required to make that collision visually convincing. This is still an enormous production by ordinary standards, but within contemporary franchise filmmaking it represents an interesting level of discipline. Variety later reported the film's approximately $869 million worldwide performance against that $180 million budget, making it one of Universal's major 2025 successes. The comparison with Jurassic World Dominion is revealing. Dominion surpassed $1 billion globally, while Rebirth stopped below that threshold, but Rebirth also represented a reset with a new cast and a somewhat lower production cost than some recent mega-budget spectacles. A franchise does not necessarily need every installment to break the previous record to remain healthy. Sometimes the more important objective is stabilizing audience interest and establishing characters who can support future stories. Rebirth's commercial performance indicates that audiences were willing to follow Jurassic without Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard at the center. That is strategically significant. Franchises can become dangerously dependent on specific stars or storylines. If audiences accept a new ensemble, the intellectual property gains flexibility. Universal can continue exploring the Jurassic universe through different characters, locations, and missions rather than repeatedly finding reasons to bring the same heroes back. Scarlett Johansson's star power obviously reduces the risk of that transition. She is not an unknown actor being asked to carry a massive franchise. Mahershala Ali adds enormous dramatic credibility, while Jonathan Bailey brings a different energy and growing international recognition. The ensemble signals that Universal wanted the reset to feel substantial rather than inexpensive. Gareth Edwards similarly brings blockbuster experience while remaining associated with a more grounded visual approach than some franchise filmmakers. David Koch provides direct creative continuity with the original era. Steven Spielberg's executive producer role provides another symbolic connection. The result is a carefully constructed bridge between old and new. Rebirth does not discard Jurassic history. It selectively reconnects with the parts Universal believes remain strongest: isolated danger, scientific ethics, awe, survival, human arrogance, and dinosaurs that feel larger than the people trying to use them. The movie's title therefore functions almost like a statement of intent from the studio. This is not Jurassic World 4 in name, even though it follows the Jurassic World trilogy chronologically. Calling it Rebirth communicates that a new phase is beginning. That marketing language matters because Dominion had already delivered a sense of culmination by bringing together characters from both the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World eras. Attempting to top that crossover through even more returning characters would likely produce diminishing returns. Rebirth instead reduces continuity pressure. New viewers do not need to remember every previous subplot. The premise can be understood quickly. Dinosaurs survive in isolated equatorial regions. A team needs biological samples from enormous species. The mission takes them into a forbidden research environment, and civilians become trapped in the same danger. This clarity is valuable. One criticism often directed at long-running franchises is that mythology becomes homework. Rebirth tries to restore accessibility by making the immediate objective simple. The complexity comes from execution rather than explanation. Find the creatures. Obtain the samples. Survive. Escape. That almost video game-like clarity is not necessarily a weakness because adventure films benefit from concrete goals. The audience always knows what the characters are trying to accomplish. Suspense then comes from obstacles. The deeper themes operate underneath the objective. Why are humans entering the island? Who benefits from the samples? What responsibilities do scientists and corporations have toward genetically created life? How much risk is acceptable for medical progress? When does a mission become exploitation? What happens when professional obligations conflict with protecting innocent people? These questions can emerge naturally because the plot has given characters reasons to disagree. The best franchise filmmaking often works this way. The surface objective is simple enough for everyone to follow, while the character and thematic questions provide depth for viewers interested in more than spectacle. Rebirth's success ultimately depends on maintaining that balance. Too much philosophy and the movie risks slowing a dinosaur adventure. Too little and the characters become delivery systems for action scenes. Too much nostalgia and the reset feels unnecessary. Too little connection with Jurassic history and the movie could feel like an unrelated creature feature using a famous title. Too many dinosaurs and they become ordinary again. Too few and audiences may feel the film is withholding the attraction they paid to see. Gareth Edwards is therefore balancing competing expectations from the moment the film begins. He is making the seventh movie in a franchise whose first installment fundamentally changed blockbuster visual effects. Recreating that cultural impact is impossible. The more realistic goal is restoring some of the emotional grammar that made Jurassic Park enduring. Curiosity before spectacle, suspense before attack, character before casualty, and respect for the creatures' scale. Rebirth does not need to convince us dinosaurs are real for the first time. It needs to convince us that being near one would still be extraordinary. That is the essential challenge of the film, and the new characters are designed around different responses to that extraordinary reality. Henry sees scientific history walking in front of him. Zora sees an unpredictable operational environment. Duncan sees a mission threatening people he trusts. Krebs sees biological value connected to enormous commercial possibilities. Reuben sees danger approaching his children. Each perspective is understandable, and the dinosaurs become different symbols depending on whose eyes we are using. This multiplicity is one of the franchise's greatest strengths when handled well. A dinosaur can be miracle, monster, commodity, research subject, weapon, patient-saving biological resource, or simply an animal trying to survive. Humans create the labels. The animal remains itself. Jurassic World Rebirth returns to that fundamental tension and places it inside a story about extraction, because extraction is perhaps the purest expression of the human instinct that has driven this franchise from the beginning. Discover something extraordinary, then ask what can be taken from it. John Hammond extracted DNA from ancient mosquitoes and turned genetic information into living animals. Later corporations extracted commercial entertainment, military possibilities, and genetic technology from those animals. Rebirth's pharmaceutical mission wants another form of biological value. Every generation believes it has found a more responsible reason to interfere. Every generation enters the system convinced it understands the risk better than the previous one. The dinosaurs keep proving that knowledge is not control. That is why the franchise can continue returning to similar ideas without becoming completely meaningless. The technology changes. The commercial motivation changes. The characters change. Human arrogance remains remarkably stable. Rebirth's most promising thematic idea is that even an objective capable of helping humanity can reproduce the same dangerous pattern when institutions begin treating living organisms primarily as resources. The moral answer is not simple because refusing the mission could also mean refusing a potential medical breakthrough. This ambiguity is more compelling than straightforward corporate villainy. If the medicine could genuinely save lives, then the mission has moral weight. The question becomes how that benefit is pursued, who controls it, and what sacrifices are considered acceptable. Zora's role places her directly inside that dilemma because she is paid to make the impossible operation possible. Her skills give other people's ambitions physical reality. Scientists and executives can design objectives in safe rooms, but someone like Zora has to enter the island. That makes her the person who encounters the true cost first. Every casualty, every failed plan, every civilian endangered, and every encounter with the creatures transforms abstract risk into lived experience. Her decisions therefore become the moral center of the action. Scarlett Johansson's ability to combine physical confidence with emotional restraint suits a character who does not need to explain every feeling aloud. Zora can begin professionally detached and gradually reveal where her limits exist. The audience does not need her to become frightened of dinosaurs in a conventional sense. Courage is not absence of fear. Competence includes recognizing when danger has exceeded the mission's value. Her strongest decisions can therefore involve knowing when not to obey. This is a classic action hero transition from contractor to protector. But within Jurassic, it also connects with the franchise's suspicion of institutions. Corporate objectives are clean on paper. Individuals experience the mess. Duncan's loyalty, Henry's scientific conscience, and the Delgado family's vulnerability give Zora reasons to measure success differently from Krebs. The mission begins with samples as the objective. Survival gradually becomes the objective that matters. This transformation is the essence of almost every Jurassic story. People enter because they want something from dinosaurs. Eventually they want only to escape them. The creatures reduce ambition to survival. Money, prestige, patents, and professional goals become meaningless when something enormous is hunting you. This reduction has always been part of the franchise's appeal because it temporarily removes the complexity of modern life. A dinosaur attack creates absolute clarity. Run, hide, protect the person beside you. Find a way out. Rebirth's new cast allows the franchise to experience that clarity again without carrying the accumulated emotional baggage of 6 previous films. The characters do not need to save the entire planet from dinosaurs. They need to survive a dangerous place. That smaller objective can paradoxically make the movie feel more intense because danger becomes immediate rather than abstract. Global stakes are often emotionally weak because audiences cannot imagine billions of people at once. One father trying to keep his children alive is understandable. One operative deciding whether to risk herself for another person is understandable. One scientist standing close to a creature he has studied his entire life is understandable. Gareth Edwards' best opportunity is to make those individual moments feel enormous against the physical scale of the dinosaurs. The reported $869 million worldwide result suggests audiences remained eager to experience that scale theatrically. Rebirth may not have matched the billion-dollar heights of the preceding trilogy, but commercially it demonstrated that Jurassic can survive a major cast transition and that dinosaurs remain among cinema's most reliable global attractions when packaged as a large-scale theatrical adventure. Creatively, however, the more important test is whether the film makes the franchise feel dangerous again. Rebirth is not truly a rebirth merely because the actors changed. It earns the title only if the audience begins looking at the dinosaurs differently, less as familiar franchise mascots and more as living forces occupying a world humans should approach with humility. That is the deeper promise behind the isolated equatorial environment, the abandoned research facility, the extraction mission, the new ensemble, and David Cope's return. Human beings are entering dinosaur territory again. They have a plan again. They believe the plan is justified again. They have sophisticated technology again. They believe they understand the risks again. And anyone who has followed Jurassic history knows exactly why those words should make us nervous, because the central law of this franchise has never changed. The moment humans become convinced that nature has finally been brought under control is usually the moment nature begins demonstrating how little control they ever had. Jurassic World Rebirth becomes much more interesting when we move beyond the basic excitement of seeing dinosaurs return to the screen and examine what the movie is actually saying about human ambition. Survival, scientific responsibility, corporate power, genetic experimentation, and the dangerous belief that humanity can repeatedly enter environments it does not control simply because the potential reward appears valuable enough. Because Gareth Edwards' film is built around a contradiction that has existed at the center of the Jurassic franchise since the beginning, human beings are intelligent enough to accomplish extraordinary scientific breakthroughs. Yet they repeatedly confuse the ability to do something with the wisdom to understand whether it should be done, and Rebirth takes that familiar Jurassic idea and places it inside a new kind of mission where the objective is no longer building a dinosaur attraction or selling genetically engineered creatures but extracting biological material from some of the largest surviving prehistoric animals because their DNA may contain the key to a potentially life-saving medical breakthrough. 5 years after the events of Jurassic World Dominion, dinosaurs are no longer flourishing everywhere across the planet. Earth's modern ecology has proven largely inhospitable to them, leaving the remaining populations concentrated primarily in isolated equatorial environments whose climates resemble the prehistoric conditions in which these animals once evolved. This premise is one of the most important decisions in the entire movie because it quietly reverses the direction in which the previous trilogy had taken the franchise. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom ended by releasing dinosaurs into the wider world, and Jurassic World Dominion explored a planet where humans and dinosaurs were attempting to coexist, creating the impression that the logical future of the franchise would involve increasingly global dinosaur encounters. Rebirth instead narrows the geography again. Dinosaurs become concentrated in dangerous ecological pockets, allowing the story to return humans to dinosaur territory rather than bringing dinosaurs continually into human territory. That distinction dramatically changes the power relationship. When dinosaurs appear inside modern cities, farms, roads, and populated areas, humanity possesses infrastructure. There are governments, emergency services, aircraft, military technology, communication networks, hospitals, roads, and millions of people capable of responding. The animals may be dangerous, but they are entering a world designed and controlled by humans. On an isolated island, that relationship reverses. Humans become the visitors. Technology becomes temporary. Communication can disappear. Transportation can fail. Rescue becomes uncertain. A predator does not need to defeat civilization. It only needs to reach one person before that person reaches safety. This is the environment where Jurassic storytelling historically becomes most effective, because the franchise works best when the characters gradually discover that everything separating modern humanity from prehistoric vulnerability can disappear very quickly. Zora Bennett enters this environment with professional confidence. Scarlett Johansson plays Zora as a highly skilled covert operations expert, someone accustomed to entering dangerous situations deliberately rather than accidentally. This immediately separates her from many previous Jurassic protagonists. She is not a scientist who unexpectedly becomes an action hero, a parent searching for a child, a lawyer trapped inside a failed theme park, or a tourist caught in disaster. Dangerous operations are her profession. She understands planning, extraction, weapons, risk, team coordination, and survival. That makes the Dinosaurs narratively more challenging because the movie cannot generate tension simply by showing Zora becoming frightened. She has likely faced violence and uncertainty before. The prehistoric environment must demonstrate that conventional expertise has limits. This is where the Jurassic universe creates an unusual kind of threat. Human combat training is based on assumptions about human opponents. People understand doors, weapons, vehicles, communication, tactics, and predictable physical capabilities. A dinosaur operates outside those assumptions. A giant predator does not care about intimidation. It cannot be negotiated with. It does not understand professional reputation. It may attack from water, vegetation, darkness, or terrain where conventional tactical preparation becomes irrelevant. Zora can be exceptionally competent and still be physically insignificant compared with the animals surrounding her. This allows Scarlett Johansson to play an action protagonist without turning the film into a superhero story. Competence helps Zora survive, it does not make her invulnerable. That distinction is essential. Jurassic movies lose tension when characters appear capable of surviving anything simply because they are franchise heroes. Rebirth needs the audience to believe that skill increases the probability of survival but never guarantees it. Zora's professional background also creates an interesting moral question because she initially approaches the expedition as a job. She has been contracted to accomplish a specific objective: help secure genetic material from 3 enormous prehistoric creatures representing land, sea, and air. The objective is scientific, but the operation is transactional. Somebody wants something difficult obtained, and Zora possesses the expertise required to obtain it. This professional distance allows the movie to gradually challenge her definition of success. At the beginning of an operation, success can be measured simply: acquire the samples and leave. But survival stories become morally interesting when circumstances introduce people who were never part of the original calculation. The Delgado family becomes crucial for exactly this reason. Ruben Delgado and his family are civilians whose boating expedition is disrupted by aquatic dinosaurs, leaving them drawn into the same dangerous environment as Zora's team. They did not sign a contract. They were not compensated for risk. They did not choose to participate in pharmaceutical research. Their only objective is survival. Once Zora's mission intersects with them, the moral geometry changes. A professional operation can no longer be evaluated only by whether the target samples are obtained. Innocent people are now involved. Every decision has to consider whether completing the mission increases or decreases their chance of getting home alive. This creates a conflict between contractual responsibility and human responsibility. Zora may have been hired to retrieve biological material, but no contract can completely erase the moral obligation created when vulnerable civilians need help. This is where Scarlett Johansson's character becomes more interesting than a straightforward mercenary hero. The dinosaurs test her physical skills, while the civilians test what those skills are ultimately for. A capable person can use expertise to accomplish someone else's objective, or that person can decide that protecting lives matters more than finishing the assignment. The distinction sounds simple from the safety of an office, but it becomes difficult after people have already risked themselves to reach the objective. The deeper the expedition travels into danger, the harder abandoning the mission becomes psychologically. Human beings are strongly influenced by sunk costs. Once money, time, effort, equipment, and lives have been invested, people often continue because stopping would make previous sacrifices feel meaningless. Jurassic World Rebirth can exploit this psychological trap beautifully. Every additional danger creates two opposing arguments. One says the mission has become too costly and should be abandoned. The other says they have already sacrificed too much to leave empty-handed. Martin Krebs represents the second pressure particularly well. Played by Rupert Friend, Krebs is connected to the pharmaceutical interests behind the expedition, and his presence ensures that the scientific objective remains attached to commercial incentives. The possibility of creating a medicine capable of saving enormous numbers of lives sounds unquestionably noble until questions of ownership, access, patents, pricing, and profit enter the discussion. Jurassic stories have always been suspicious of the moment scientific wonder becomes corporate property. The original Jurassic Park was not created merely because cloning dinosaurs was scientifically fascinating. Hammond transformed the breakthrough into a commercial attraction. Jurassic World industrialized that idea into a massive theme park. Later stories explored auctions, military applications, and genetic engineering. Rebirth changes the product but preserves the pattern. The dinosaur itself is no longer necessarily the commodity. Its biology is. This represents an important evolution in the franchise's treatment of exploitation. Humanity has already learned that putting dinosaurs in cages and selling tickets creates disaster. But instead of concluding that prehistoric life should be left alone, institutions discover another reason to extract value from it. The justification is now stronger because medicine can save lives. That moral complexity is far more interesting than simple greed. If dinosaur DNA genuinely contains biological information capable of producing revolutionary treatment, refusing to investigate it could itself appear irresponsible. Imagine knowing that millions of people might survive illnesses if researchers obtain a sample from an animal living in a dangerous region. Would it be ethical not to try? The answer is not obvious. This ambiguity allows the film to ask a classic Jurassic question in a new form: how much risk and interference can humanity justify in the name of progress? The danger is that once a noble objective enters a commercial system, motives become mixed. Scientists may want to save lives. Executives may want patents. Investors may want returns. Operatives want payment. Researchers want discovery. Governments may want control. Patients want treatment. All of these motivations can coexist around the same biological sample. The sample itself becomes valuable not because of what it is but because of what different people believe it can provide. The dinosaurs, meanwhile, remain completely unaware of the economic system humans have built around their bodies. This is one of the franchise's recurring ironies. Humanity resurrected prehistoric animals, assigned commercial value to them, modified them, confined them, transported them, weaponized them, and now wants to harvest genetic information from them, while the creatures themselves are simply attempting to live. The moral failure is rarely located in the animal. A predator behaves according to its nature. Human beings repeatedly create situations where natural behavior becomes catastrophic. This is why the strongest Jurassic stories resist portraying dinosaurs as villains. A Tyrannosaurus does not possess evil intentions. A Mosasaurus is not making a moral choice when it attacks prey. Even genetically altered creatures exist because human scientists created them. The horror comes from recognizing that people constructed the circumstances and then blamed nature when control disappeared. Rebirth's abandoned research facility intensifies this theme because the island represents physical evidence of earlier scientific arrogance. It is a place associated with experiments that were hidden from the wider world, where dangerous organisms and genetic failures were effectively left behind. An abandoned laboratory inside a prehistoric ecosystem is almost the perfect visual metaphor for the Jurassic franchise. Human beings build something with confidence, eventually lose control, retreat, and leave nature to occupy the ruins. Walls crack. Vegetation grows through structures. Containment systems stop functioning. Equipment becomes useless. Animals move through spaces once designed to restrict them. The architecture remains as evidence that humans once believed they were in charge. Gareth Edwards is particularly well suited to this imagery because his filmmaking frequently emphasizes the relationship between human scale and environments shaped by forces larger than individual people. In Rogue One, enormous imperial structures dwarf characters. In Godzilla, human beings appear physically insignificant beside ancient creatures. In The Creator, landscapes and machines create a sense that individuals are moving through systems far larger than themselves. Jurassic World Rebirth allows Edwards to apply that visual language directly to one of cinema's most famous examples of human beings confronting biological scale. Dinosaurs should not merely occupy the frame. They should alter the meaning of the frame. A human figure standing beside an enormous animal communicates vulnerability instantly. No dialogue is required. This is especially important in 2025 because photorealistic digital dinosaurs are no longer technologically surprising. The audience expects convincing visual effects. The filmmaking challenge is therefore emotional rather than technical. How do you make viewers who have already seen countless dinosaurs feel our fear again? The answer lies in perspective, timing, sound, environmental interaction, and character response. Spielberg's original Jurassic Park understood that the first Brachiosaurus scene needed people looking upward in disbelief. The dinosaur mattered because Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler could barely comprehend what they were seeing. Their reaction translated impossible scientific achievement into human emotion. Later, the Tyrannosaurus attack used darkness, rain, sound, vibration, and limited visibility to turn another dinosaur into terror. The franchise's greatest trick was never simply showing dinosaurs. It was changing what dinosaurs meant from scene to scene. Rebirth needs the same variety. If every creature encounter is an attack, the dinosaurs become generic monsters. If every encounter is beautiful, suspense disappears. Henry Loomis exists partly to preserve the scientific wonder necessary for this emotional range. Jonathan Bailey's paleontologist is fundamentally different from Zora because his professional relationship with dinosaurs begins in knowledge rather than combat. For someone who has devoted his career to prehistoric life, encountering living dinosaurs is not merely dangerous, it is existentially extraordinary. Fossils provide fragments. Living animals provide behavior, movement, sound, social interaction, feeding, breathing, and countless details paleontology can only infer. Henry therefore enters an environment that can fulfill the deepest dream of his profession while simultaneously threatening his life. That contradiction is inherently dramatic. The closer he gets to the animals, the more scientifically valuable the experience becomes and the more physically dangerous it becomes. Curiosity pulls him toward what survival instinct should tell him to avoid. This tension has existed throughout Jurassic storytelling. Scientists are fascinated by the very organisms demonstrating why resurrection was dangerous. Henry continues that tradition but does not need to duplicate Alan Grant. Grant's original relationship with living dinosaurs was complicated by the fact that his entire understanding of extinct animals was suddenly challenged by their existence. Henry lives in a world where dinosaurs have been publicly known for decades. His fascination is therefore different. He is not discovering that resurrection is possible. He is examining what living prehistoric organisms can teach science after humanity has already experienced the consequences of bringing them back. This generational difference matters. Henry belongs to a scientific world transformed by Jurassic history. He has access to knowledge Grant never had before 1993. Yet increased knowledge does not eliminate danger. This reinforces one of the movie's central ideas. Information and control are not the same thing. You can understand an animal's species, anatomy, likely behavior, and ecological role while still being unable to predict exactly what it will do in a specific moment. Living systems are probabilistic. They respond to hunger, fear, territory, reproduction, injury, weather, and countless environmental factors. Human plans prefer certainty. Nature offers probability. Jurassic disasters happen when people mistake probability for certainty. The extraction mission is built around exactly that mistake. The team can research where the target animals are likely to appear. They can develop equipment. They can prepare sample collection methods. They can calculate routes. They can choose experienced personnel. Every preparation improves their chances, but none removes uncertainty. A creature can move unexpectedly. A storm can change conditions. Equipment can malfunction. Another predator can appear. A team member can panic. One small disruption can cascade into larger failure. This is the chaos theory spirit of Jurassic Park even when Ian Malcolm is nowhere nearby. Complex systems produce outcomes that cannot be perfectly predicted because every variable interacts with others. The more complicated the mission becomes, the more opportunities exist for something small to become catastrophic. Gareth Edwards can make this visible by gradually stripping the team of control. At the beginning, they possess transportation, weapons, communications, equipment, expertise, and a clear objective. Every loss moves them closer to raw survival. A damaged vehicle is not merely an action beat, it removes mobility. Lost communication removes rescue. Lost equipment makes the original mission harder. Darkness reduces visibility. Injury slows the group. Separation removes collective strength. Each failure changes the survival equation. This gradual technological erosion is one of the most effective mechanisms in adventure cinema because modern characters begin with advantages that must be removed before the environment can become truly threatening. A smartphone and functioning helicopter can solve many problems. Take those away and geography matters again. Rebirth's isolated island provides a believable environment for that regression. Once technology fails, characters confront the physical realities of terrain, distance, weather, water, and predators. Human beings suddenly become animals navigating another animal's ecosystem. The film's three-target structure, seeking genetic material associated with enormous creatures across land, sea, and air, also allows the environment itself to keep changing. Danger is not confined to one ecological space. Water cannot automatically provide escape because aquatic dinosaurs exist. Open ground is not safe because terrestrial animals dominate it. Even the sky contains prehistoric danger. This creates a feeling of ecological enclosure. Traditional survival instincts tell us to move from one dangerous environment into another safer one. Rebirth removes that certainty. The island and surrounding waters belong to creatures adapted to every domain. Human technology becomes the only thing allowing temporary movement between them, and when that technology fails, vulnerability becomes complete. This is why the aquatic dimension is particularly valuable. Jurassic movies have historically focused most heavily on terrestrial dinosaurs, even though Jurassic World introduced the Mosasaurus as a spectacular marine attraction. Rebirth's mission gives sea creatures greater narrative importance. Water naturally produces a different kind of fear because humans cannot see clearly beneath the surface. On land, a character may identify where a predator is approaching from. In deep water, danger can exist directly underneath without visible warning. The ocean also removes many human advantages. Running becomes impossible. Cover is limited. Boats can be damaged. Falling into the water transforms a technologically capable person into an extremely vulnerable swimmer. Edwards can exploit scale especially effectively here because a giant marine animal can make a substantial boat appear tiny. Again, perspective creates fear. The creature does not need to attack constantly. The knowledge that something enormous is beneath the characters can be enough. Suspense often becomes stronger when the threat is understood but unseen. This is another reason restraint matters in a franchise filled with familiar creatures. If the camera immediately reveals everything, imagination has nothing to contribute. Allowing characters and viewers to wait creates psychological participation. A ripple becomes meaningful. Silence becomes suspicious. A distant sound becomes information. Jurassic World Rebirth benefits when it remembers that suspense begins before the dinosaur arrives. The same principle applies to the island's genetically altered inhabitants. The franchise's movement toward engineered creatures has always been controversial because Jurassic Park originally drew power from the idea that real prehistoric animals were already extraordinary enough. Jurassic World introduced the Indominus Rex partly as commentary on audiences and theme park visitors demanding something larger and more dangerous. The park's executives believed ordinary dinosaurs had become insufficiently exciting, so they manufactured novelty. That premise reflected blockbuster sequel culture itself. Every installment feels pressure to become bigger. Rebirth inherits the consequences of that logic. Genetic experimentation has continued, and the island contains organisms shaped by scientific intervention. The important question is whether the movie uses these creatures merely to create bigger monsters or as evidence of the franchise's central warning about biological manipulation. The second interpretation is more meaningful. A distorted organism is frightening not simply because it looks dangerous but because its existence proves someone decided natural evolution was insufficient. Human beings deliberately rewrote biology to satisfy an objective. Once again, the Jurassic disaster begins with dissatisfaction. Dinosaurs were not enough, so scientists modified them. Entertainment was not enough, so corporations sought other applications. Existing medical science is not enough, so the new expedition seeks prehistoric biological solutions. Progress itself is not portrayed as evil, but the franchise repeatedly questions whether human institutions know when to stop. The title Rebirth therefore carries darker implications. Rebirth can mean renewal, but in Jurassic history every act of bringing something back also creates a new responsibility. Resurrecting extinct animals created ethical obligations toward organisms that never chose to exist in the modern world. Creating engineered species creates responsibility for their suffering and behavior. Extracting biological material for medicine creates responsibility for how the resulting discovery is used. Science expands possibility, but possibility expands responsibility. The tragedy is that institutions often focus on the first half of that equation. They celebrate what can be achieved and postpone questions about consequences. Martin Krebs represents the economic system capable of turning possibility into ownership. He does not need to be portrayed as someone who hates people or wants disaster. In fact, corporate antagonists become more believable when they genuinely believe their objective is rational. If Krebs thinks the mission can lead to a revolutionary drug, he can justify enormous risk by pointing toward future lives saved. Every dangerous decision can be framed mathematically. Risk a small number now to benefit millions later. This utilitarian argument becomes disturbing because it can justify almost anything if the promised benefit is large enough. Zora and Duncan experience the immediate cost in individual human terms. Krebs can think statistically. This difference creates moral conflict. One dead team member is a line in an operational calculation to an institution, but to Duncan or Zora that person may be a friend. One endangered civilian family may seem insignificant compared with millions of potential patients, but Ruben does not experience his children statistically. They are his entire world. Cinema naturally pushes audiences toward individual perspective because we see faces rather than spreadsheets. This allows Rebirth to challenge abstract justifications through personal stakes. The potential medicine may genuinely matter, but the people endangered by obtaining it also matter. Ethical decision-making requires holding both truths simultaneously. That is more complicated than simply defeating a greedy executive. The Delgado family gives the film the clearest human counterargument to mission logic. Ruben did not choose the expedition, and his children certainly did not choose it. Their presence forces every professional character to answer a simple question. If completing the mission increases the chance that these civilians die, is the mission still worth completing? The answer reveals character. Zora's evolution can be measured through how she responds. Duncan's loyalty can be measured through whom he protects. Henry's scientific passion can be measured against his willingness to prioritize human life. Krebs' values can be measured by whether he views the family as people or obstacles. The dinosaurs create the crisis, but decisions reveal the characters. This is why survival stories can be excellent character studies when written effectively. Extreme pressure removes social performance. People have less time to construct respectable explanations. Fear reveals priorities. Someone who appears generous in safety may become selfish in danger. Someone who appears emotionally distant may risk everything for another person. Someone obsessed with completing an objective may discover that survival has changed the meaning of success. Rebirth's Island is therefore not merely a location. It is a test. Every character arrives with an identity created by civilization: operative, scientist, executive, father, crew member, and the prehistoric environment asks which parts of those identities remain when civilization disappears. Zora's job title matters less when ammunition is limited. Henry's academic knowledge matters only if it can help people understand the creatures around them. Krebs' corporate authority becomes meaningless if nobody chooses to obey him. Ruben's parental identity becomes stronger because protecting his family remains meaningful regardless of environment. Duncan's loyalty becomes tangible because survival gives loyalty a physical cost. This stripping away of institutional identity is one of the oldest functions of wilderness storytelling. Put people far enough from society and hierarchy changes. The person with the largest bank account may become less valuable than the person who knows how to navigate. The person with the highest corporate title may depend on someone they previously treated as an employee. Nature creates its own hierarchy based on immediate usefulness. Dinosaurs intensify this because they represent a world existing before every human institution. Corporations, governments, patents, contracts, and money are recent inventions compared with evolutionary time. Standing beside an enormous prehistoric animal makes those systems feel temporary. Henry Loomis is perhaps the character most capable of appreciating that perspective. Paleontology trains people to think across geological time. Human civilization occupies an almost microscopic portion of Earth's history. Dinosaurs dominated ecosystems for periods almost impossible to comprehend through ordinary human experience. Their resurrection therefore challenges anthropocentrism, the assumption that humanity naturally occupies the center of existence. Jurassic stories repeatedly remind us that human dominance is contingent. We rule modern ecosystems partly because the giant animals that once occupied them disappeared long before our civilization emerged. Bring those animals back and the hierarchy becomes less obvious. Rebirth's equatorial sanctuaries almost resemble alternate worlds where the modern human era has temporarily receded. Characters enter and discover that Homo sapiens is not automatically the most physically powerful organism in every environment. This can create awe as much as fear. A giant herbivore does not need to threaten anyone to make a human character feel small. Scale itself becomes philosophical. The creature represents deep time made physical. This is why Henry's presence is essential. Without someone capable of appreciating the animals beyond their danger, the movie risks becoming simply humans versus monsters. Jurassic should always contain moments where survival pauses long enough for wonder. The franchise began with wonder before terror. The famous initial dinosaur reveal in Jurassic Park told audiences that the achievement was miraculous before the movie demonstrated why it was dangerous. Rebirth needs to preserve that emotional order even though its world has known dinosaurs for decades. Henry can still experience wonder because scientific familiarity does not necessarily destroy awe. Astronomers understand stars better than most people and can still be overwhelmed by the night sky. Marine biologists understand whales and can still find encountering one extraordinary. Knowledge can deepen wonder rather than replace it. Henry's excitement therefore does not need to make him naive. He can understand exactly how dangerous a dinosaur is while simultaneously recognizing the privilege of observing it alive. This dual awareness makes scientific characters more interesting than people who either worship nature blindly or fear it completely. Zora gradually gains access to this perspective because survival forces her to see the environment as more than an operational map. At first, locations may be coordinates and objectives. Later, the island becomes an ecosystem whose patterns must be respected. This transition mirrors the central Jurassic lesson: you cannot control nature effectively without first recognizing that it is not designed around you. Tactical thinking often treats environments as spaces through which people move. Ecological thinking recognizes that environments are networks of living relationships. A route that looks empty on a map may be a feeding ground. Water that looks safe may be territory. A building that appears abandoned may provide shelter to an animal. Henry's knowledge can therefore become practically valuable, bridging science and survival. This is important because movies sometimes portray intellectual expertise as useless once action begins. Jurassic is strongest when knowledge matters. Alan Grant survived partly because he understood dinosaur behavior. Henry can fulfill a similar function without becoming a copy. His scientific interpretation can help Zora make tactical decisions, while Zora's practical instincts can prevent Henry's curiosity from becoming fatal. Their contrasting skills create complementary competence. Neither character needs to become less capable for the other to matter. Good ensemble adventure writing gives different people problems only they can solve. Duncan contributes experience and loyalty. Ruben contributes parental determination and civilian perspective. Other crew members contribute operational abilities. The danger becomes convincing when survival depends on cooperation rather than one invincible hero. This also makes casualties more meaningful because losing someone removes a capability from the group. A death is not simply spectacle, it changes what the survivors can do. Classic adventure films understand this. Every lost guide, pilot, engineer, or specialist increases vulnerability. Rebirth can use its ensemble similarly, gradually narrowing options as the environment becomes more dangerous. This process also creates suspense around trust. In a survival situation, unreliable people can be as dangerous as predators. If Krebs withholds information or prioritizes the samples over the group, every decision becomes harder. Characters must evaluate not only where dinosaurs are but whether the person beside them shares their objective. The original Jurassic Park used Dennis Nedry's betrayal to transform a technical crisis into catastrophe. Rebirth does not need to duplicate that plot, but the principle remains powerful. Complex systems become far more dangerous when human self-interest disrupts cooperation. A dinosaur cannot sabotage a contract, but a person can. Human greed creates openings that nature exploits. This is one reason Jurassic films remain relevant despite their fantastical premise. The dinosaurs are impossible in the real world as presented, but institutional behavior is extremely recognizable. Organizations pursue profit. Scientists compete for breakthroughs. Executives underestimate risk. Workers follow instructions until danger becomes personal. People hide information to protect investments. Decision makers far from the physical danger make choices affecting those inside it. Rebirth's pharmaceutical premise modernizes these concerns. Biotechnology has become even more culturally significant since Jurassic Park was released in 1993. Genetic sequencing, gene editing, personalized medicine, synthetic biology, and pharmaceutical development are now part of mainstream scientific discussion. The idea that unique biological information could lead to major medical advances therefore feels less like pure science fiction than it once might have. This makes the mission concept clever. The dinosaurs remain fantastical, but the motivation feels contemporary. Humanity increasingly treats genetic information as data with enormous scientific and economic value. Rebirth simply asks what would happen if the most valuable genetic information on Earth belonged to animals humanity resurrected from extinction. Ownership becomes philosophically strange. Can a company own a discovery extracted from an organism created through earlier genetic manipulation? Who has the right to authorize collection? Do resurrected species possess conservation status? Are they invasive organisms, endangered animals, laboratory property, or something entirely new? The film does not need to answer every legal question for these ideas to enrich the world. Their existence reminds us that bringing extinct animals back would create problems far beyond whether they eat people. Humanity would need entirely new ethical categories. Rebirth's ecological premise suggests that the dinosaurs are struggling to survive in the modern world, which adds another moral layer. These creatures were brought into an environment for which they were not naturally adapted. If most of Earth has become inhospitable, the surviving equatorial populations are effectively refugees from human experimentation. Entering their remaining habitat to harvest biological material can therefore appear exploitative even when the medical goal is admirable. Humans created them, failed to provide a sustainable world for them, and then returned to extract value from the survivors. This is a darker interpretation of the mission and one that strengthens the franchise's environmental themes. Nature is repeatedly treated as something humanity can redesign according to immediate needs. But ecosystems do not operate like products. A species belongs to networks of climate, food, territory, disease, reproduction, and competition. Moving an organism into a different era does not guarantee survival. Dominion imagined dinosaurs spreading globally, while Rebirth's premise acknowledges that biological reality eventually imposes limits. Modern Earth is not the Mesozoic. Temperature, vegetation, atmospheric conditions, prey availability, pathogens, and human development differ. The dinosaurs cannot simply occupy every environment indefinitely. This ecological correction gives the franchise a more grounded direction while restoring rarity. It also creates melancholy. Humanity achieved the impossible by bringing dinosaurs back, only to discover that resurrection does not automatically provide belonging. The animals exist in the wrong time. Their surviving tropical refuges become remnants of an experiment whose consequences outlived its creator's intentions. Henry may see them as scientifically priceless. Krebs sees pharmaceutical opportunity. Zora sees mission targets. But from an ecological perspective, they are living organisms trapped between eras. This gives the title Rebirth another layer. They were reborn biologically but never truly restored historically. The world they evolved for no longer exists. Human science can reconstruct DNA but cannot reconstruct millions of years of planetary conditions perfectly. This is perhaps the ultimate limit of the Jurassic dream. Bringing back an organism is not the same as bringing back its world. The franchise's earliest promise was that science could make dinosaurs live again. Rebirth quietly asks what living again actually means if those animals have nowhere appropriate to live. That question gives the movie more emotional depth than a simple extraction adventure. It also explains why the island can feel both dangerous and tragic. The creatures dominate locally, yet their global future is uncertain. They are powerful individuals belonging to vulnerable populations. This combination resembles real conservation dilemmas, where an animal can be physically dangerous while the species itself remains threatened. Human beings often struggle to hold both ideas simultaneously. We protect predators that could kill us because ecosystems have value beyond immediate human comfort. Rebirth pushes that principle into science fiction. Should resurrected dinosaurs be protected even though humans created them artificially? Does artificial origin reduce their moral value once they are capable of suffering, reproducing, and living independently? If humanity caused their existence, perhaps responsibility becomes greater rather than smaller. The pharmaceutical mission complicates conservation because protecting individuals may conflict with obtaining samples that could save human lives. Again, the film's strongest ideas emerge when no answer is completely comfortable. Purely evil motivations produce easy morality. Rebirth is more interesting when valuable objectives collide. Human health matters. Animal welfare matters. Scientific discovery matters. Individual survival matters. Corporate systems complicate all of them. The action sequences then become physical expressions of these conflicts. Every time the team approaches a creature, the scientific objective requires violating the instinct for safety. Every time they retreat, they risk losing the potential medical benefit. Every civilian they protect consumes time and resources but affirms human responsibility. Every corporate demand to continue raises the question of who is being asked to bear the risk. This gives action narrative meaning beyond spectacle. A chase is not merely a chase if the characters entered danger because someone decided the reward justified it. The audience can evaluate that decision while experiencing the suspense. Gareth Edwards' direction can reinforce this by maintaining physical scale and environmental realism. When characters look tiny against landscapes, the mission itself can begin to feel arrogant. Humans arrive with a small boat or aircraft believing they can enter, collect what they need, and leave. The environment answers with forces too large to fit comfortably inside their plan. This visual humiliation of human confidence is pure Jurassic. The most memorable image in the franchise may ultimately be the broken promise of control. Fences failing, vehicles stopping, laboratories abandoned, parks collapsing. Rebirth adds another abandoned facility to that visual history, reminding us that every generation of Jurassic entrepreneurs leaves ruins behind. The question becomes whether Zora's generation learns anything from them. The physical evidence is everywhere. Someone previously believed this island could be controlled. Someone built infrastructure. Someone conducted experiments. Someone eventually abandoned the place. The rational conclusion would be to stay away. Yet the possibility of medical value brings humans back. This demonstrates how incentives overcome historical memory. People know something is dangerous but return when the reward changes. This is not necessarily stupidity. Civilization itself advances because people accept calculated risk. Exploration, medicine, engineering, and scientific research all involve danger. The moral problem appears when people underestimate who pays the cost. If Zora voluntarily accepts the risk for compensation, that is one thing. If civilians become endangered without consent, the equation changes. If team members are misled about the true danger, consent becomes questionable. If future patients benefit while current workers die, institutions must justify that trade-off. These are real ethical structures hidden inside a fictional dinosaur mission. They give Rebirth a foundation that can support more than 2 hours of spectacle. Mahershala Ali's Duncan Kincaid becomes especially important because he humanizes the professional side of the expedition. Zora's relationship with Duncan means the team is not composed entirely of disposable specialists. Trust already exists. In dangerous environments, pre-existing trust is invaluable because hesitation can kill. Duncan does not need lengthy explanation to establish importance if Zora clearly relies on him. Their interactions can communicate history through efficiency. The way they coordinate, understand one another's decisions, or disagree without needing to explain every assumption. Mahershala Ali's screen presence also provides emotional gravity. He is an actor capable of making quiet moments feel consequential, which helps balance a movie filled with enormous creatures. Blockbusters sometimes mistake scale for emotion, but the two are different. A giant dinosaur can impress the audience. A human expression makes us care what the dinosaur might destroy. Duncan's value lies partly in grounding the spectacle through relationships. If Zora fears losing him, an attack becomes emotionally specific. Without that connection, the same sequence might simply be visual excitement. The Delgado family performs a similar function on the civilian side. Ruben's fear for his children gives danger an immediately understandable emotional structure. Parents do not calculate risk abstractly when their children are involved. They become focused on protection. This can create conflict with professionals who need to think strategically. Ruben may reject a route because it endangers his family even if Zora believes it offers the best overall chance of escape. Such disagreements can produce tension without anyone behaving irrationally. Different responsibilities create different definitions of acceptable risk. Zora may think about the group. Ruben thinks about his children first. Krebs thinks about the mission. Henry may think about both survival and scientific significance. Duncan thinks about Zora and the team. The story becomes richer because there is no single hierarchy everyone accepts. The dinosaurs force cooperation, but human priorities resist it. This tension also prevents the movie from becoming a simple military operation. The presence of civilians introduces unpredictability. Trained teams can follow commands quickly. Families cannot be treated like soldiers, especially when frightened. Children may freeze, panic, wander, or react emotionally. Adults may refuse orders if they believe those orders endanger loved ones. Zora therefore has to transition from commanding professionals to leading people with completely different experiences. Leadership becomes communication rather than authority. This gives her another form of challenge. Shooting or running cannot solve every problem. She has to earn trust. The family has no reason to automatically believe the person whose mission brought them deeper into danger. This can create an interesting reversal. Zora is professionally competent but socially accountable. Her choices need explanation. That accountability may eventually influence how she evaluates Krebs' authority. If she becomes responsible for civilians, following the contract blindly becomes impossible. This is the kind of character evolution that allows action and morality to intersect naturally. The environment changes Zora not through speeches but through responsibilities. Every person she chooses to protect makes the original objective less central. By the time survival becomes the only meaningful goal, the audience understands why. This is also the classic Jurassic progression from exploitation to humility. Characters enter believing they can take something from nature. They leave grateful simply to have survived nature. The reduction of ambition is the lesson. Hammond wanted a revolutionary park and ended Jurassic Park wanting to get his grandchildren off the island. Grant entered as a consultant and left protecting children. Later characters repeatedly discovered that corporate objectives become meaningless once containment collapses. Rebirth continues this tradition through an extraction mission. The samples initially justify entering the danger. Eventually the ability to escape becomes more valuable than anything the samples represent. The movie's approximately $180 million reported production budget shows the enormous commercial machinery required to stage this lesson as global entertainment, and its roughly $868 million worldwide theatrical gross demonstrates that audiences still respond strongly to the Jurassic formula when presented as a major theatrical event. Yet the financial success also creates an interesting real-world parallel with the movie's themes. The film itself belongs to an entertainment franchise whose prehistoric creatures have enormous commercial value. Universal continues producing Jurassic stories because audiences continue buying tickets, watching the films, visiting attractions, and engaging with the brand. In other words, the movie warns about commercializing dinosaurs while existing because dinosaurs remain commercially powerful. This contradiction is not necessarily hypocrisy, it is part of what makes the franchise culturally fascinating. Jurassic Park has always criticized the commercialization of scientific wonder while itself being one of the most successful pieces of dinosaur entertainment ever created. The original movie turned Hammond's fictional theme park dream into real-world attractions and merchandise. Rebirth continues operating inside that paradox. The filmmakers therefore have to provide spectacle while questioning the desire for spectacle. Jurassic World addressed this directly by creating an audience inside the fictional park that had become bored with ordinary dinosaurs, mirroring blockbuster viewers demanding bigger creatures. Rebirth's strategy appears different. Instead of making everything larger simply because sequels traditionally escalate, Gareth Edwards attempts to restore scale by making humans smaller. This is a more sustainable approach. A dinosaur does not need to become infinitely bigger if cinematography can make the audience feel vulnerable again. Suspense does not require a new creature every 5 minutes if one well-designed encounter has weight. The island does not need to threaten the entire planet if the characters we care about cannot escape it. Smaller narrative geography can create larger emotional stakes. This is perhaps the most important creative lesson Rebirth can offer the franchise going forward. Jurassic does not need constant global escalation. The concept is already extraordinary. A group of human beings trapped near dinosaurs is enough if the characters matter and the filmmaking respects danger. Returning to isolated environments is therefore not creative retreat. It can be creative concentration. Remove global politics, worldwide dinosaur management, legacy character crossovers, and increasingly complicated mythology, and the central idea becomes visible again. Humans are physically fragile animals standing beside creatures from a world they were never meant to share. Everything else should grow from that image. Henry sees its scientific miracle. Zora sees its tactical danger. Duncan sees what it could cost his team. Reuben sees what it could do to his family. Krebs sees what its biology could be worth. Gareth Edwards sees cinematic scale. David Cope sees a framework for revisiting the philosophical concerns that helped establish the series. The audience sees dinosaurs again, but the success of Rebirth depends on making that word, again, feel less important than the immediate experience. We know what a Tyrannosaurus looks like. We know velociraptors are dangerous. We know Jurassic expeditions go wrong. Surprise therefore cannot depend solely on plot information. It must come from atmosphere, character, staging, and moral complication. A familiar threat can remain frightening if the circumstances feel real. Sharks did not stop being frightening in cinema because audiences know what sharks look like. Darkness did not stop being frightening because everyone has experienced it. Fear comes from vulnerability. Rebirth's job is to restore vulnerability to a franchise whose heroes had gradually become increasingly comfortable around dinosaurs. Zora may be an action specialist, but she has no magical connection with the animals. Henry may understand them, but understanding does not grant control. The Delgado family has no special preparation at all. This resets the emotional relationship between humans and dinosaurs. They are not pets. They are not cavalry arriving conveniently during a final battle. They are living forces with their own behavior. Humans survive by respecting that fact. That respect is ultimately what the Jurassic franchise has always demanded from its characters. Hammond's failure was not simply creating dinosaurs. It was believing creation gave him ownership. Later corporations repeated the mistake by believing genetic control created authority. Rebirth's pharmaceutical expedition risks another version of the same error. Believing biological usefulness creates entitlement. The movie can therefore ask whether humanity has finally learned to approach these animals differently or merely invented a more respectable reason to exploit them. Zora's choices become the answer on an individual level. Krebs represents institutional continuity. Henry represents scientific wonder tempered by knowledge. Duncan represents human loyalty. Reuben represents responsibility toward family. The dinosaurs represent a natural reality indifferent to every argument humans are having about them. They do not know they contain medically valuable DNA. They do not know pharmaceutical companies exist. They do not understand patents, contracts, or extraction missions. They respond to territory, hunger, fear, instinct, and environment. That indifference is what makes them such effective symbols. Human beings build complicated moral and economic systems around nature, while nature continues operating without consulting those systems. A storm can destroy $1 billion project without understanding money. An animal can kill an executive without understanding corporate hierarchy. An ecosystem can reject an invasive species without understanding the scientific achievement that produced it. Jurassic stories repeatedly humble humanity by placing our elaborate institutions beside forces that do not recognize them. Rebirth's Island is another arena for that humiliation. The characters arrive with a sophisticated plan. The plan will inevitably encounter a world that does not know it exists. The difference between survival and catastrophe will depend on how quickly the humans stop demanding that the environment conform to the plan and start adapting themselves to the environment.